Perfect. Welcome.
All right. Welcome, guys. This is the Ghost Squawk Experience, episode 9. Tonight with us, we have InvestorNoir. He's been into cryptos since 2014 and has a unique long-term view of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. He has his own podcast, where basically he's trying to spread the mass adoption of cryptocurrency to ordinary investors. His podcast is called Cigars and Cryptos, so make sure that you go and check that out. He's an avid cigar aficionado, so we chose our drink selections to represent him very carefully. Right today, I have this is a milk stout. Right, it's 11% alcohol, so I definitely didn't cheap you out. And this one is a bourbon barrel-aged stout, so I thought that cigars and bourbon kind of went hand in hand, so I picked this one just for you, buddy. So cheers.
Good choice.
Awesome. So I brought a classic bottle of Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey here. As per our last conversation, you did say you are based out of Philly. And being a cigar connoisseur, I thought this would be a nice choice. So,
plus, nothing says America like Jack Daniel's whiskey.
Yeah, nothing like a bottle of JD. So, cheers to you, Noir.
Right,
thank you very much for coming on.
Cheers to you, my friend.
Thanks. So, one question we Chad and I were kind of discussing before this is maybe you could help us out because. Just to kind of start off with one of your favorite topics anyway, we're just looking for advice. Like if you're a noob to cigars, where would you even get started?
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually a good question.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think it's important that you visit resources that have good information, unbiased information.
Okay.
So go to cigars.com to start, right?
Okay.
They have a lot of articles in their blog that'll teach you how to get started, the types of tools that you'll need to participate in the cigar experience. Me personally, I purchase most of my cigars from my local brick and mortar stores here. And I also buy online at famoussmoke.com. So definitely find out how to get involved by reading blogs, specifically the blogs that are on cigar.com or Famous Smoke. Then you'll need a toolkit. So me personally, I prefer V-Cut tools. It's a V-Cut Calibri cutter, and it cuts a deep V-shaped groove into my cigar. I will. Tonight I am smoking the Cohiba Siglo 6. It's a Cuban Puro. Wow. I pulled this out just for the show.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cheers to that.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So it's a guillotine mechanism. So you hold your cigar level with the cutter, and then you quickly press down, and then it adds a very deep V-shaped groove that allows you to draw from the cigar.
As opposed to the one where it's basically just a full guillotine and it just cuts it right off.
Right. Okay. Right. So you have guillotines, you have punches, and then you have V cutters, and I prefer V cutters.
Okay.
Well, it depends. If it's a large ring gauge cigar, so if it's really big, then I may go with a punch. For the most part, I prefer a V cut for my cigar.
Yeah.
Now, what's the difference between a punch and a V shape?
Well, the punch is like a hole. It's like a hole that you would punch right in the top. So the orifice is smaller, but it still gives you a good quality smoke, a good draw. But I like a big plume, big clouds when I smoke cigars. So I always tend to go with a V cut for all of my cigars.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Now that I have my cigar cut, it's ready to be smoked. I'm going to take my torch and I'm going to gently toast the end without scorching the sides.
Okay. Wow, what a ritual. Man.
Mm-hmm. Now that's good.
Nice.
Wow.
I'm ready now.
Man.
I'm ready. Let's get it cracking, baby.
All right.
Now, Noir, just I'm gonna sound like very amateurish here, but to my knowledge, unlike cigarette smoking, you're not supposed to inhale the cigar smoke when you smoke it. Is that true?
Okay. Well, some people say that you shouldn't. The rule is that you draw it into your mouth and you blow it out. But I retrohale frequently. So I'll take a big draw. I'll blow out 60 to 70% of the smoke. I inhale a small amount and then I blow the rest through my nose to allow the smoke to pass over all
through the
of
nasal cavity, so you get that
the
aeration
flavor.
Oh, wow, brilliant! It's
flavor receptors in the back of your tongue.
It's like wine tasting when you kind of do that. Yeah, wow, okay,
Exactly.
cool.
Okay. Wow, thanks for clarifying that, because like I'm not big into cigar smoking myself, but man, I guess after this episode, I got to get some cigars.
Yeah.
Light one up with your boy, man. It's all good.
Yeah,
Hey,
sure,
definitely. Just an FYI, we're gonna be coming on your show. I believe it's gonna be next week, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, maybe I should probably go to like my local cigar shop here and try to pick something up.
We'll make sure that we stock up before then.
Yeah, man. Hey, wait a minute. You're north of the border, right?
Yeah, I'm north. I'm
man, you
Montreal.
can grab Cubans. You can grab Cubans.
Yeah, bro, go to Kanawaki, where I used to live. Remember, Jen?
In
Kanawaki, they have them for real cheap.
Oh, okay, nice.
Kanawaki, for those of you guys who don't know, it's an Indian reservation, and there's extraordinary tax benefits that they have in Canada. You could basically get your gas tax-free, restaurants are tax-free, everything's just cheaper there, and because it's cheaper, you have a lot of business coming in, so all the best waiters actually go to these Indian reservations because it's not taxed, right? So there's a lot of competition between them to have good service, and that's where you can find a lot of really good cigars. They make their own wine and stuff like that. So if you're in the Montreal area, you might want to check out Kanawaki.
Oh, awesome. So Noir, how did you get into cigar smoking yourself? Because on your website, you did say that like you like a while back, like you visit like a cigar lounge and then you kind of got hooked onto it, or?
Yeah, I had a neighbor who lived next door to me, and he and I weren't necessarily on the best terms, but his wife was really cool. And so I would speak to her every time I saw her. Hey, how you doing? You guys okay? And then one day, the husband comes outside and he says, we're neighbors, and my wife says I need to be nice to you. So I was like, okay, well, fine, great. He said, well, I'm getting ready to go somewhere, man. Why don't you get in the car and come with me? And so I'm kind of looking at this.
Sounds like a mafia boss.
Right. I'm like, yeah, what's your angle, bro? Come on,
That's very forward there. Get in the car with
me. And so he takes me to the cigar lounge. And I think the first cigar I smoked was champagne, a Perdomo champagne. And I had a Flor de Fina that day as well. And we sat there for about 4 hours and we got hammered. We were drinking the whole time. And after that 4 hours, I actually liked my neighbor. And I came away with a new hobby. My wife calls it a habit, but for me, it's a hobby. So.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Like mine says something similar about my drinking, but hey, this is craft brew, man. It's a hobby.
That's pretty cool. Why don't you tell us how you got into cryptos?
Well, 2014, I was traveling back and forth from Atlanta to San Diego. And I happened to be online paying for some tickets. And one of the payment options said BTC or Bitcoin. So I was like, well, what is this? And I didn't think much of it after that. I said, well, when I get to, San Diego, I'll look it up. And so flew to San Diego. I was there for a couple of days and I was going to book my flight back for the next week. And I'm on the same website and it says paying BTC. And I'm like, So I'm looking up what is BTC. Then it said Bitcoin. Then I said, well, what is Bitcoin? And then it pointed me to a Reddit site. And then it pointed me to a site where I could read the white paper. And so I went to Reddit and I saw what people were talking about. I downloaded the white paper and I read the white paper. And then I fell down a rabbit hole. So I immediately went out. I think I dropped like $2,000 and I bought an Antminer S1. It tells you how long I've been in the game.
Yeah.
And I bought an S1.
Classic.
Right. I plugged it up. I bought a couple of grid seeds and I bought some Butterfly Lab 38 gigahash boxes. And I plugged all of this stuff up in the room and I just let it run. Fast forward a year, the difficulty rating increased and my rigs weren't as profitable as they were. So I let it run for a few more months and then I just shut it off and, kind of forgot about it. Well, early March of 2017, I was listening to the radio on the way to work and they were talking about it. And I'm seeing it on TV now and I'm seeing news articles about Bitcoin. I'm like, yo, I have some of that. And so that's when I went and I found my password for blockchain.info. And I was like, whoa, like,
whoops.
Okay, right.
Look at this.
Right. And so
that's a surprise.
Right. And so I quickly, went back to Reddit, started looking up different things about Bitcoin and started finding communities about Bitcoin. And that's how I fell into crypto Twitter in March of 2017.
Yeah, so I real quick for everybody that's watching, I got a chart of Bitcoin here. So back in 2014, Bitcoin was at like $100, 150, $160 a coin. So
yeah, it was sub 100 in those days. Yeah.
So that was pretty crazy.
It was
awesome. I
awesome.
remember I read the original white paper in 2008, and what struck me was not just its use as a currency, but just the nature of blockchain in general. I was like, wow, this is something that's going to be really revolutionary, right? And I don't think, unfortunately, it still hasn't been so widely adopted. I'm not really sure why, because like if you're an insurance company or something like that, you don't want people tampering with your records, or if they do, you would want to make an amendment to it rather than to actually go and change that. And I know some of them are more intelligent about how they do things, but I just thought that it was a really useful technology. And I started back in those days, I was doing a lot of AI research. So I had these graphics cards, it's like GTX 3, GTX 465s, which back in those days was like, wow, So I was doing like neural networks and cool stuff like that. So I was like, man, I'm on this thing. And I just, back in those days, the software, it wasn't reliable. And, it was just hell to get it set up on my Linux rig. So I kind of like, got distracted by other projects, retard in a dollar store type of thing. And so I wish I would have stuck through, but eventually we did start to trade it. I started getting back into it probably around the same time you did, maybe 2015 or so, 2016. And I got my Coinbase account. I started loading up on Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then that later eventually became the fund that we had.
That's cool, man.
So,
it's good to hear. It's good to hear people talk about how they got into the space. Everyone has their own path to on-ramping into crypto, but it's great how those different paths all lead to the same road.
Correct.
You know what I mean? And you talked about you don't understand why adoption hasn't occurred as quickly, and I have my opinion on why that has happened, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that cryptocurrencies were marketed by developers. Mm-hmm. They were marketed by anarchists. They were marketed by alternative economic theorists.
Right.
And they were marketed to people. And because a lot of people don't understand the value of Austrian economics or the benefits of blockchain technology or the necessity to have faster transactions per second, kind of went over people's head. Mm-hmm. And I think adoption will come when we stop talking to people and we start reaching out to businesses. Mm-hmm. People don't have a reason to use crypto if they're not incentivized to use crypto. There has to be a reason for them to use it. So if you're talking to someone and say, oh yeah, this is sound money, they don't care about that. But if they walk into a store and they realize that they could get 5% off of their purchase, because that retailer doesn't have to pay that 2.75% transaction fee plus 30 cents.
Right.
And it's, oh, okay, well, I could save a couple of dollars if I come in here. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but let's say you're going to buy a car. That adds up.
Right.
Let's say you're going to buy a washer and dryer. That adds up.
Yeah.
And so people would be incentivized to use it if businesses incentivized them to use it.
Yeah. That's a very interesting take. And I actually do like that. That seems to be a theme of your show, is getting that adoption started. In fact, Chen and I actually had a conversation with your contact about integrating his payment system into our website so that users can pay with crypto.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that reference.
No problem. That's the incentive. That's how we incentivize people to use it.
Right.
We give them a reason, and I hope that works out well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again. And another thing I wanted to mention was, that I remember when to take a step back, I was when I was trading Bitcoin and I was transferring it back and forth between accounts that we had or whatever. Sometimes the transfer of Bitcoin would take up to 24 hours, right? And Ethereum would be like an hour. Bitcoin Cash would be like 20, 30 minutes. Litecoin always transferred instantaneously for me. So that's why I really was an advocate of Litecoin, because at the time, I believe that the thing that could actually become a viable currency in the crypto space might be Litecoin. But you are actually turning me on to some coins that there's been a lot of development in that space since then. So would you care to share that with our listeners?
Sure. Before we start, I am a big fan of traditional SHA-256 and SHA-3 blockchains. So I love Bitcoin. I love Litecoin. I love coins that have hybrid mining possibilities, like Digibyte, because it has like 5 different mining algos that you can use to mine it.
And Raven too, right?
Right, and Raven as well. Yeah. But I think going forward, if we're going to be looking at crypto as a currency for people to use and not a store of value, I think the next iteration of value transfer will be directed acyclic graphic coins, or DAGs.
I remember when that came out. Yeah, that white paper was fascinating.
So I am a big fan of Ferrum Network. I am a big fan of Nano, because they are feeless and instantaneous. You can send Nano from one wallet to another in sub-second times.
Jeez, so, wow.
Right. After release 18, Nano went sub-second. And last time I checked, it's at like 73, 74 cents. But I just
pulled up the chart now. Yeah, it's 73 cents.
Yeah, I was buying in the Nano at 16, 17 cents.
Wow. Okay.
I just believe in the project. I think that is the way forward, to get around transaction times, to get around increases in block fees, transaction fees. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's going to be the way forward for coins and tokens in the future.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Now, the big thing in the news, obviously, last week was the halving. And when I was looking at the Bitcoin chart before, this is not the first time that's happened, right? There's always been that increase in value as people are buying the rumor, only to sell the news later once it happens, right? So I was expecting a little bit more of a pronounced dip in the price of Bitcoin. Because I'm waiting to load up on it myself. I just don't think I think at this time you'd be kind of FOMOing into a trade. And so I was just wondering on what your thoughts were for the price of Bitcoin specifically with regard to that halving.
Well, just to chime in here for a sec before Noir jumps in, based off of the halving, I mean, like it pulled back quite a bit, and it hit some key technicals right on the 8,000 mark, right? And now it looks really
it looks like it's bull wedging, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it looks very, very bullish, right? I mean, I believe even like you could make an argument that this long-term trend line here is probably being tested to the downside, right? So, Noir, what's your take on the halving and where Bitcoin prices will be in the future?
unpopular opinion, I'm actually still expecting that dump to come.
Yeah, me too. That's why I asked. That's why I'm waiting. I'm like, come on, let's get it over with already.
Right. I think the demand for Bitcoin is there, right? And the supply of new Bitcoins is being cut in half every time a block is mined, right? But
so scarcity.
Right. So that scarcity is there. But I think as miners begin to retool to become profitable, they'll be cashing out Bitcoin to buy new rigs. And I'm expecting that to lower the price for a single Bitcoin in the next maybe month or two. That's just my simple, rudimentary, basic TA. I'm big on fundamentals, though.
Yeah.
From a fundamental perspective, I am expecting a real pullback.
Yeah. No, so here's the thing, which is why I tend to caution a lot of new traders from getting involved in Bitcoin. And this is a complaint that I have about it, which isn't exactly the coin's fault, but we can talk about those aspects later, is that a lot of these transactions, the real moves in the price are dominated by large wallets. And there's really no technical analysis you could do to predict this. They come out of nowhere and it's just bang, right? So I'm waiting for another, like we like to call it, those big red dildos to get in on a nice position.
Right. It's coming.
Yeah. Okay, good. I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah, I think it's coming. Just because I look at it as a business. I've owned a few businesses in my life, and you always use capital to buy equipment to create more capital.
Yeah.
To create profit. You know what I mean? And if you are observing Moore's law, every year or so, there are new rigs that come out that are thinner, that are cooler, that run
more
faster,
energy efficient,
more energy efficient. So as miners begin to think about retooling their operations, they're going to have to cash out Bitcoin to do it, or they're going to have to pay Bitcoin for this new equipment.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
Either way, I think that dump is inbound. I just don't think it's going to be a sudden drop. I think it's going to be a slow grind.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like
it'll go up.
What we saw with the coronavirus, right? My take on that is, okay, everybody's saying, okay, well, Bitcoin is going to be a new safe haven. It actually has not been acting like a safe haven asset at all, right? And, when this whole Corona thing happened, a lot of people, and in my opinion anyway, a lot of people were cashing out their Bitcoin to survive, right? Because this was a very new economic situation that a lot of people were faced with. Most Americans don't even have $400 in their savings account, right? Mm-hmm. So here we say, okay, on top of that, you live paycheck to paycheck and you can't go to work, right? Because these are service people, right? They're the backbone of our economy, barbers, waiters, and so forth. So what I believe is that people were kind of cashing out to, get something under some kind of a little bit of a savings, to stave off the next few months. So I don't know what your take on that would be.
I'd have to agree with you, but I don't think that would be the reason why we would see a big or a sudden drop in Bitcoin. Only because I think in our echo chamber, most of us who are really heavy into this space are in some form or fashion technical. Okay. We have technical jobs or roles, or we're self-employed, right? If you are a student or proponent of Austrian economics, you've understood the need to save anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think those folks
fair enough, good point,
who are struggling right now weren't able to save because they couldn't save. Not because they didn't want to, but because they simply couldn't. Mm-hmm. And I think those are the folks that are feeling the pain. But I think the folks in this space that were accumulating the corn the entire time aren't cashing out. I think right now they understand that this is a buying opportunity to get in where they fit in, because I'm half ready to start looking at my 401k and cashing that out so I can buy some corn myself.
Yeah.
Just waiting on this dip to come so that I could get
it. We're in the same boat, brother.
So it's like everybody's waiting on that dip to come.
Yeah,
You're
exactly, man.
But you know what though? I still dollar cost average, because if the dip never comes, then I would have missed out on a buying opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. So the way I actually talked about this with a buddy, recently, right before the halving, this was actually last weekend. And my take on it was like, look, and I told him just what I told you, all my analysis to anybody is always going to be the same, is that, there's going to be a little bit of a dip that we can probably buy, is you buy the rumor, sell the news type of thing. And, you want to try to get in on that. Unfortunately, we didn't really see, we did hit some significant technical levels, but it just wasn't the dump, that red dildo that I wanted to see. Right. So I advised to my friend, Matthew, if you're on the line, chime in. But I advised him like, okay, like a 10th of your position, maybe a 5th of your position, whatever you want to allocate to it, just go ahead and get in now just in case. Right. Because Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It could moon to $50,000, and it just does that, right? It would. Well, it hasn't gotten that far yet, but you understand what I mean. Is behavioral profile is not something you can count on, right? So I was saying, like, just so that you don't get left holding an empty sack, you might consider entering now or in the near future, and then just be prepared to buy on dips if and when we do see that dump.
I agree. I trade. I'm not really a trader as much as I am an investor. But I moved half of my crypto position into Tether.
Did you? So to be prepared. Gotcha.
So that I could
Smart
buy
man.
the dip.
Smart man. Yeah.
Oh,
See what I mean?
Smart man.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah, I don't. I'm at a point now where I don't use any money out of my paycheck other than the dollar cost average to buy Bitcoin.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
A lot of people don't do that for some reason. And I guess it's, I suppose it has to do with the fact that some exchanges don't offer the ability to transfer into Tether. But, like if you expect a dip coming, like, why wouldn't you transfer to Tether?
Well,
because
also I know I know that there's a lot of mistrust around Tether, right? Because we know for a fact that some of the major exchanges too, like Bitfinex, were basically running a Ponzi scheme with it, right? So basically they were supposed to be backing their Tether by a certain amount of US dollars, and they were basically selling that from under themselves to purchase more Bitcoin, right? So that broke out in, I want to say 2018, 2019, that story.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of mistrust about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tool.
Correct.
I look at Tether like I look at a gun. A gun is not dangerous. Just the person that's wielding it is dangerous. And whether
big fan of Second Amendment.
I'm with you. I'm an Army vet, so I'm all about that pew pew.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I was just, yesterday I had if you get enough liquor in me, I'll show my collection. But I was doing that with Chen and Zin, our marketing guy, last night. I was like, hey, check this out. I have a little Draco, a little baby Kalashnikov. Mm-hmm. So got a 357 that I inherited from my uncle. I didn't even know he died a while ago. So
what do you keep close on hand?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I have a Kimber Ultra Raptor too.
Kimber, nice. Those are beautiful guns. I love Kimbers.
Yeah, got laser sights on it. 45.
Do not break into this dude's house.
No, it'd be a
bad idea.
Very bad
idea.
Very bad day. But Tether is a tool, just like U.S. dollar coin offered by Coinbase, just like DAI offered by the DAO. They're tools. And when used properly, you can move in and out of positions. It's just important to do that on an exchange that has liquidity.
Very important point. And this is one of the reasons why I actually don't advocate people trading Bitcoin as much as I do investing in Bitcoin. That's a liquidity issue.
Right.
This is like the number one concept. And in our courses, our 12-week program, we introduce this from the very first class, the concept of liquidity, because I believe in finance, this is one of the most poorly understood concepts. And it's one of the biggest sources of risk that people don't take into account. I've spoken at conferences about this. It's a big That's the hill I'm going to die on, is to make sure everybody understands liquidity risk.
Right.
It's a very odd passion, very odd pet peeve, but still I'm very, very vocal about that.
Yeah, I have to agree. There's nothing worse than getting advice from some avatar on Twitter telling you to buy the next Bitcoin. You have to go to some obscure, shady exchange to get it. And then you buy it, and then you realize that there are no buyers when you're ready to sell.
I have a great example of that. I'm still working on a crypto arbitrage fund with a friend. And we had a member on our team who he had no idea what the fuck he was doing. And, we decided, okay, we found this out later. And we decided, okay, the first, triangular arbitrage opportunities we're going to take, we're just going to do it manually as a proof of concept to make sure that it works. So what does he do? He takes our Bitcoin and goes and buys football coin on some random ass exchange. I didn't know there was such a thing as football coin, but if you pull up the graph, if you pull up that little matrix, football coin, the arbitrage was like 10% or whatever, right? But it's like good luck buying said football coin, right? So
Right.
Our order sat there for like 2 days, and it's like, we couldn't do any other trades because he had our capital locked up waiting for a coin that was never going to be bought.
Right.
I was actually trying to pull up this chart here. Is there such a thing?
No, it's like XFL or something like that. I don't even know. Like it's probably so obscure it's not even on there.
Yeah, there's so many altcoins in this space. I mean, like that. Like Noir, how do you, or what would you recommend to somebody who is not as knowledgeable about this space? Like besides from just understanding a few of the altcoins, like what would you recommend?
I consult people on the side. I am not a financial advisor, so I never give financial advice, but I do consult people in how to get into the space. Number one, Cash App is infinitely better than Coinbase for buying Bitcoin. Don't worry about buying any alts until you get your first Bitcoin.
Cash App?
Yes, Cash App.
Get that right now.
You need to understand how custodial and non-custodial wallets work. So I always introduce them to Edge Wallet or Atomic Wallet or Exodus Wallet so that they understand custody versus non-custodial wallets.
Now, do you use cold storage wallets like the Nano Ledger?
I'm a big Ledger fan.
I'm a big Ledger fan too. Yeah. I've had my Ledger. My Ledger is such a beast, man. They're like little tanks. It's like an AK. You can bury it in the backyard and it still works.
Yes,
and I've had mine since 2017, I think. Still works like a champ.
Yeah, I have 3 that I've used the same seed phrase for, and then I have one that has a different seed phrase that I have linked up for just in case.
Okay.
But I introduce them to the difference between custodial and non-custodial wallets. And then I advocate them buying this book called An Altcoin Trader's Guide.
This is the app, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I actually have the website up here for everybody.
Yeah, I saw that too. Just wanted to make sure it was the right one.
Okay.
And then I advocate they buy this book called An Altcoin Trader's Handbook by Coin Trader Nick. And then I suggest they read The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. And that's how I onboard people into crypto. Because A, you need to know where to buy it. B, you need to know how to store it. C, you need to understand that there's more to cryptocurrency than just Bitcoin. And then D, you need to understand why you're using it.
And this is something that I'm, very specific about when I talk to people, especially newbies, about crypto, is that if I send Bitcoin to an Ethereum wallet, I mean, they're like, now I see some of the apps are getting smarter. They'll ping you and say, hey, just FYI, this looks like an address that's not for the coin that you're using. But if I send $2 million in Bitcoin to an Ethereum address, that 2 million is gone, right? It's just into the void. It just does not exist anymore, right? And so as critical as I am of the modern financial structure and banks and all that, there have been times when, on the other end, the bank teller fat fingered a digit on the recipient account. This person gets $5,000. My recipient didn't make a call. No problem, Mr. Kovac. And then they correct it, right? So I'm wondering if because my knowledge in that particular space is a bit dated. So I was wondering if you had any input on that particular problem with regard to transferring cryptos.
When you get into crypto, you understand that the responsibility of securing your funds is yours and not the
Absolutely.
bank's.
Absolutely.
It is essential that anyone who gets onboarded into crypto understands that.
Mm-hmm.
It's incumbent upon anyone who tells anyone about crypto that they explain that there are risks involved with it.
Yeah.
If I've explained to you the risks, I show you where to go to do more research about the risk, and you do it anyway, it's your fault.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I hate to sound cold when I say that, but I've done that at least twice.
Me too. Yeah. And that's why, luckily these were with smaller amounts, but I could see, when I transfer large amounts, man, I'm like double, triple checking, going to blockchain.in and make sure that that address exists. And it's stressful, right? Because, that's a very, that's a huge, we have risk reward, right? And that's a huge risk, right? To be seeing your entire transfer just disappear into the ether. So, and that was one of my complaints about crypto in general, was that, I thought that maybe the exchanges or the apps could be doing a better job at least, I don't want to say policing, because, like you said, we're all adults here and we're getting into crypto because we want more control over our finances, right? So, but with that responsibility comes that risk, right? It's like libertarianism, right? You expect the government to only come in the interest to help the people. Well, that's at the sacrifice of a lot of the niceties that we have in today's current system, right? And I'm okay with that. A lot of people are okay with that. A lot of people say they're okay with that. But when those things start to dry up and disappear, then we're going to see exactly how cool they are with libertarianism, right? So I feel the same way about cryptos. And originally, if I had infinite time, I had this idea for an app where basically, if you have your set of holdings of crypto, be it Stellar Lumens or Ethereum or whatever, and I have mine, I want to go buy a sofa from you off Craigslist, the app can just figure it out, right? It'll just handle it for you. And I was wondering if, because I just downloaded Cash App now, maybe that solves that problem. My information on this is dated. Is there any such application available?
That what translates what you're sending to the user's address?
Well, mainly it would be a form of risk mitigation for getting the wrong address. That's mainly. But, I had a lot of issues where, if I wanted to send crypto to somebody, he doesn't have, or I wanted to receive it, he doesn't have that. So he has to cash it out, put it into that address, send it to me. That I thought that would be a really convenient way to encourage adoption, because for people who are just kind of getting into it and they don't know necessarily the difference between, the Ethereum and the Litecoin and all that, they can just have a set holdings and have the app manage that transfer for them, right? So I want to get to a day where I can comfortably and safely and reliably go do peer-to-peer interactions with you if I want to buy something from your Craigslist, or have your consultancy services where I could pay you and just have it take care of it for me.
Cash App works really well, Dan.
Okay, yeah, that was actually my question, and I preface this because, again, my knowledge on this is dated. I just found out Cash App now, so thanks to Noir for pointing that out for me.
I use it's by far the cheapest way to buy Bitcoin.
Okay.
I mean, I've been everywhere to look to buy Bitcoin, and it's really efficient. You can link your PayPal account to it, transfer money over to it, and just buy Bitcoin directly. It costs you. It's cheaper than Coinbase.
Yep.
And then from there you can send it out to wherever you want. I always, copy and paste my addresses when I'm sending stuff, but I typically prefer to use QR codes because you can't fuck that up.
Right.
Good point.
Now, to answer your question about technology that would quote unquote do it for you, there are projects out there right now that are have developed that type of technology. The two that stand out to me in the moment are Ferrum Network, where you send a link, the person clicks on the link, they make a payment in whatever crypto that they want to make that payment in, and then it comes to you in the payment that you choose via atomic swaps. there is also unstoppable domains
Mm-hmm.
where you just someone pays you at a link address. Like if you wanted to send me money or crypto for a consultation, well, sound money, that's what I meant to say. God damn it. If you want to send me sound money for a consultation and you were sending me $100, you would send it to cigarsandcrypto.zil. That's the address that you put into your wallet, and it would auto translate for you on my end, and then I would receive.
That's great. Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay. All right. So anybody else on the Zooms? Do you have any questions for him? Wale, like, do you have anything you would like to ask?
I'd like to know more about how you got into all these classy cigars.
You know what, man? I started out smoking things that people told me to smoke, and then I quickly found out that everyone's palate is different.
Man, that's so true. I'm into hot sauces, by the way, right? So what people think is like super spicy for me is like, and what I think is super spicy, other people are like, you know. And the way I like to describe it, like whether I'm also a fan of like red wines, and you know, I'm a man of substance. Okay, so what I found was that just like you said, it's a palate, right? So everyone is going to have their specific thing that they gear themselves toward. Even red wine people, you'll find people who are more for Pinots, people who are more for Cabs, some for Cab Francs, right? And so I imagine it's the exact same thing with cigars.
Yeah, it is. My advice to anyone that's new to cigars is take a suggestion or two from people that you trust, but go out of your way to buy things that you've never smoked before.
Mm-hmm.
Learn about the differences between Jalapa, San Andreas, Cameroon, tobacco. Learn about the differences in the way it's grown in Nicaragua, Honduras, Dominican Republic, and Cuba. Learn about the differences.
I've heard that Honduran cigars are pretty good.
Yeah, Hondurans are good. Nicaraguan is like the new hotness. So back in the day, everyone had to have a Cuban. Now, you know, Nicaraguan puros are like the way to go. Some of my favorite brands are Nicaraguan puros. Because I've had a good number of cigars in my life, I tend to stay away from filler tobacco from certain countries because no matter what the wrapper is, the filler is kind of going to be the same, and I tend to stay away from them.
You might as well be smoking a Philly.
Yeah, pretty much. Or a Dutch Master, pretty much.
Yeah.
Black and Miles.
Yeah, you know.
We actually have a cigar bar relatively close to where I live, and I'm in Kentucky, so bourbon is our you know, staple here. So they pair, you know, cigars with different types of bourbon to, I guess, like reflect the different notes and flavors.
When I go visit you in Kentucky, Chase, you got to take me there. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, that sounds like a checkbox we got to cross off.
Like I'm generally a miserable person in life, but there are certain pleasures that I get a lot out of. Like wine pairings are one of those. Like wine and cheese, man, you want to make my day. Like those type of things I really value. So it's the pairing of two forms of substance. So, you know, as a man of substance, like you get double the bang for the buck, right? So if I could see that place, Chase, I'd be super happy.
Noir, do you have like a pairing that you like to put together?
I like cigars and rum.
Oh man, that sounds amazing.
I'm a rum
like a
drinker.
Buttery rum.
No.
Okay.
I like strong, hardcore rum.
There we go. That's my man. Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
You know what I mean?
Noir, I like you better every time I talk to you, man. Every day.
You know what I mean? I want a rum that's gonna knock my socks off. And when I came,
goddamn right, brother, preach.
When I went to Cuba, I realized that Cubans pair cigars with rum. Whether it's the person who's rolling the cigar on their lap on the street or the proprietor of the tabacalera that is selling you the cigars, they drink rum. And I went to Cuba, and we went to this pairing class on how to pair Cuban cigars with rum. And they gave me a Monte Cristo #2 and Havana Club 7. And that was just the pinnacle of my trip. I mean, I was at my apex of happiness on that trip, man. And when I came back, now I'm like hooked on sipping rums and good cigars. And I specifically say sipping rums because not all rums are made the same. Mm-hmm. But a good sipping rum like a Bacardi Quattro or #8 or Bacardi 10 or
number 8 is one of my favorites.
Or Bamboo rum is amazing.
Yeah.
Or Pilar that's made out of Key West. That was from the Hemingway factory. Mm-hmm. Amazing rum. And I love to pair it with a good cigar, man.
Oh, wow. God damn, man. We got to go for a little bourbon and cigar session. Man, you know what you said earlier about going to that lounge with your neighbor, man. I think I need to do one of those sessions with you. Man, I'll really get into cigars then.
Yeah, man. Come on, bro. Anytime, man. You know,
that's typically like all the things, that I've really spearheaded and gotten really good at. And like I did have a mentor who is kind of walked me through the process. And of course, they say the same things you do. It's like, look, I do my thing. Like I'll show you the ropes and basically get you on your feet so I can develop my own style and whatever it is.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're all different. Mm-hmm. And 100%. What rocks your boat may not rock mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I show you the basics, then you can develop your own cigar culture. Even though there's a global cigar culture amongst aficionados, everyone's experience is unique. Mm-hmm. And that experience is created by the cigar you're smoking, what you may be drinking, or what you like to pair it with. Because I know some people who don't drink and they love to pair cigars with music.
Oh,
so they'll listen to jazz or rock while they smoke a cigar, and that's what does it for them.
Noir, which branch of the military were you in? And obviously, we appreciate your service.
It's no problem, man. Thank you. Army. I was going to be a prick and say that there's only one branch, but I figure, I'll be nice on the show, man. But yeah, I was Army.
Hey, look, we have a no holds barred type of show here, so feel free to be yourself. No one's getting offended on this show. And if you do get offended, you're on the wrong show.
Yeah, man, I was Army. I wasn't a hero though, man. I was in the Army Corps of Engineers. I was a crane operator.
Oh, nice.
Oh, okay.
So,
did you get to travel much while you were in the service?
Nope. I was in the sweet spot. So I was in from 93 to 2000. So after Desert Storm and before 9/11.
Oh, nice.
Oh, okay.
My uncle actually was in Desert Storm. He flew Blackhawks.
When I wanted to enlist, I wanted to fly Apaches, but my trusty, dusty recruiting sergeant told me that I could until I got to MEPS, and I gave my oath, and they said, well, you can't fly combat aircraft with corrective lenses.
Oh.
And this was before LASIK was prevalent, so there was no get LASIK so that I can go to, combat aircraft school. So I realized that I wasn't going to be flying Apaches. And a crane operator seemed like a good skill to have when I got out because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And construction crane operators make money, bro. And so I said, well, I'll do that. But for some odd reason, I got into IT, and that was it for me.
So is that what you do now? Is IT work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I got a question to ask you, Noir. Off the record, you said that you used to work in radio broadcasting, and you also have your own podcast itself, Cigars and Cryptos.
Yep.
Just wanted to know, how did you get into something like this, and what was your process? I mean, like, for somebody like us, I think we're about 9 episodes in.
Yeah, this is ninth episode.
So we're fairly new, and you know, we just do this. You know, we like to call it, we do this the DC way.
Danny Chen way is just kind of winging things. Like I call it douched. Do shit till it works.
So, you know, it's been a big learning experience for us, doing something like this and just chatting with, you know, interesting people in all walks of life, and then making the connection to finance, you know, business, economics, and whatnot. But the whole podcasting side of it was all very new to us, and we just kind of just fell into it, right? So I wanted to know how you got into something like this. And how did you specifically focus on like the cigars and cryptos portion of it?
Why don't you pull up his page, Jen, so our users can?
I went to a cigar lounge, my home lounge, and I found that I was having the same discussion with my cigar friends over and over and over again. You know, I walk in the lounge. They have TVs on, so they're playing sports, you know, on TV. But I walk in with a tablet or a laptop, and I'm head down, looking at charts or reading white papers. And so people were like, what are you doing? You talk to us, but you're kind of disconnected. Like, what are you doing? So I said, well, I'm looking at the chart for this coin. I'm looking at the chart for that coin, or I'm reading this white paper. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Going on LinkedIn to see what this development team is, if they're really legitimate folks, you know? And so I found that I was explaining that over and over and over again. I was explaining the same information 10 or 15 times because there'll be different people in the lounge at any given moment. And so I said, well, I'm going to start recording this so that I don't have to keep repeating it. And because I have a background in radio, the idea of making an audio podcast is not foreign to me.
Right.
You can definitely tell by the radio voice.
Thanks, man. It's not foreign to me. So I just downloaded some tools. I use Audacity. I use VLC. And I go to Anchor to upload my show. And it propagates my podcast across like 10 different platforms. And I just started. And at first it was just me. Then I would reach out to different people on Twitter. And then as my shows moved along, it's gotten a little bit easier to find people to talk to me on my show. I prefer to deal with small startups. I don't like going for the big folks that everyone else goes for. The big person that you're going for on your show has probably been on 10 or 15 other shows.
Right.
So I prefer to go for those really small projects that people may not have heard about.
Well, the passion is there too. I mean, that's one thing that I really picked up from you in our first conversations, how passionate you were for cryptos. And it's not just doing a podcast for you. I mean, you really believe in this stuff and you're evangelizing it, right? And I think that you could tell that from us. Like, not only do we have this product, we have our courses that we do, but we really believe in this, right? We really want to help people, and we really want to put out tools that work. There's a lot of snake oil out there, and we don't want to be a part of that, right?
Right. I've had my fair share of pitfalls in this space. I've been scammed successfully a couple of times in this space. As recent as this year, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
And
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, in that vein, if you have any prevalent risk factors in the crypto space for our new people or whatever who are thinking of getting into it. I'm a huge evangelist of cryptos, but there are risks, right? Like we talked about earlier with the sending to the wrong address type of thing. But in that vein of scams, like, can you give our any newcomers to crypto any kind of advice of what they want to look out for? Be aware of? I mean, I felt, I sent it to the Nigerian prince, and he just hasn't gotten back with me. He's a Nigerian prince. He must be busy.
Which Nigerian prince?
You got Wale over here from Nigeria.
Yeah,
Wale's like, I know all about this.
If it sounds too good to be true, it is.
Yeah.
No one is going to 4, 5, 10x your money for you. That comes through hard work. When I hear about a new project, the very first thing I do is I read the white paper. And then I compare it with other coins or tokens that say they're going to do the same thing, right? And then I read those white papers.
Noir,
I
I have a white paper I'd like to send over to you to check out. Somebody we may be partnering with.
Okay. Send it to me. I'll make sure that you guys get my email address.
Yeah,
I have a question.
Go for it.
What's this white paper?
Well, a white paper is a technical document that outlines what the coin or token is supposed to do, how it's supposed to work, how it's different from other coins or tokens in the space.
Unique,
You know what I mean? Those types of things. And it even, in some cases, goes in depth in the technology and how they do what they say they're going to do.
Have you written a white paper, Noir?
No.
I've written 3.
I've read a ton.
Yeah, I wrote. We were supposed. In a previous iteration, we were actually supposed to build, a couple different cryptos, and I wrote white papers for all 3 of them. And of course, it never came to fruition. But I have some experience writing that, so I know what to look for.
Yeah, and because I read, so now I'm at a point where I don't really entertain new projects much. That may be to my detriment, but
You have your thing, you know.
yeah, but I don't really entertain new projects. I depend heavily on the activity of a development team. So I go to their GitHub or wherever they post their code to see calls that they make. Not calls, I'm sorry, commits.
Yeah.
To see if they're actually working on the project. I look the developers up on LinkedIn to see if these people really are doing what they say they do in the space. I compare coins a lot with similar products in the market. And I use heavy fundamental analysis to determine if I'm going to get into a coin. I only use TA to determine entry and exit points. And because I'm not really a trader, I buy and hodl for at least a month. I'm looking at, when I do TA, I'm looking at 1 day, 1 week candles. Very rarely do I go beneath 12 hours.
Well, that's the most reliable. I mean, longer the time frame, the more information content you have in that, and especially with cryptos being so volatile in general, but especially on the shorter time frames, 5-minute candles mean nothing.
So I try to rely a lot on doing my homework before I invest in something new. And I've been burned on a few. That's why I'm not a big fan of ICOs. I'm not a fan of ICOs. You're trying to sell me on a dream with an ICO.
Spray and pray, basically.
Right. You're selling me on a dream because 9 times out of 10, you're releasing this coin into the ecosystem and you've done no work.
ICOs was the modern day crowdfunding. It was like the Kickstarter for tokens. No?
Right.
Now, what's your take on the evolution of ICOs? Because originally we had ICOs that was pretty much the only vector that was used for introducing new coins. I believe the SEC had started to crack down on some of the scams and some of the outright profligate scams that were going on. So now they're doing IEOs, right? Initial exchange offerings, and a couple others. So do you have any thoughts on those? Same kind of thing.
I don't fuck with them either.
Okay.
Cheers to that.
Think about it. An IEO is probably going to occur on one exchange, right? And then they're going to try to get listed on other exchanges. That goes back to that question about liquidity.
Absolutely.
If Binance is the only place that I can buy a coin or token, I don't want it because it's not accessible to everyone. So not everyone can inject capital into the market cap for that coin or token. And so I'm not interested. So I tend to play with the top 50 coins. I only hodl bag no more of maybe 4 to 5 coins at any time, just for risk management and just the ease with which I can look at my portfolio over a given period of time.
Right.
So yeah, I don't mess with IEOs, ICOs, 1, 2, 3s, ABCs. I don't fuck with any of that.
Nice. Yeah, I love your frankness.
Being nice and blunt there.
Right in with us.
Yeah.
Another question I had was on the long-term, larger ramifications on the on economics in general for increased adoption. Because one of the issues I keep seeing that I don't think is going to end well is the increasing wealth gap, right? And I'm not talking about identity politics here. I'm talking about just the gap, the distribution of the haves and have-nots. I think for the fractional reserve lending system that this it's kind of an inevitability of that system. And I was wondering how you would anticipate that to compare with the crypto environment.
I'm choosing my words carefully here, so give me a minute to think on it.
Sure, no problem.
Capitalism does not work without a permanent underclass, because that permanent underclass is what churns money and moves it from the bottom to the top. Okay. If we continue to see disparities in the gap, the wealth gap in between those who have and those who have not, there's going to be a breaking point at which point people won't want to participate in the system as it is.
Right.
For crypto, I think one of the premise that's not often spoke of enough is that anyone can get into crypto.
I think there's a reason for that too.
I'd have to agree. But anyone can get into crypto. Anyone can build wealth with cryptocurrency, but they have to know about it.
Right.
And it goes back to the adoption question. How do we get people to know about it? If we've been talking to people for the last 11 years about why they should use Bitcoin, talking about, all of this other stuff about Austrian economics and fractional reserve banking and sound money and the tenets of what makes money work, people don't really care about that. But if you show someone a tangible benefit for using it, then they'll use it. And I think adoption needs to come through businesses and not.
I agree with you 100% there. Yeah.
And not us preaching to people.
And we're doing our part too in Ghost Squawk. We're working with everybody to integrate that into WooCommerce and,
Yeah. And I think that there are some similarities between the two systems, but I think crypto is the wild, wild west. And we're early enough that disparity can be easily remedied by moving into altcoin positions. Because 95% of alts will die over the next couple of years. That's just my opinion.
I think they already have. A lot of them already have.
There are a lot of dead projects sitting out on CoinGecko and Coinbase. I mean, CoinMarketCap. But
I know firsthand because I worked on one that died.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Me too, as a matter of fact, now that I think about it. And
Hashtag me too.
Right, and it's
I got raped by cryptos. Here's my story.
But it's bad because when that comes, there'll be a lot of people that get wrecked, but there'll be a lot of lessons learned. And only the resilient, the strong will survive that day of reckoning when it comes, And that's why I play. That's why, like I said, I play in the top 50 and I mainly invest top 2, somewhere in the middle, and then the bottom 50 coins. Other than that, I don't play with anything else.
Now, I've been fairly on record to say that cryptos could benefit from regulation. I mean, thus far, the regulators, I think that they don't understand it. And even if they did, this space evolves so fast that this top-down organizational structure just isn't going to be able to keep up. So Do you foresee any regulations coming in the future, and do you think it would be good for cryptos?
No. And I'll tell you why. Regulation is manipulation. Regulation is an opportunity for an entity to control the flow or restrict access or entry to a coin. I don't want the government regulating cryptocurrencies.
Actually, to clarify what I meant by regulation, I'll do this through example. I remember there were a lot of times when cryptos were really, really moving back in 2017, and sometimes that was not necessarily in a good way, right? So we need to exit our positions, and a lot of times we weren't able to, just because the exchange just couldn't support the volume. Now that is not something that's going to happen, on the CME, right? That's not something that is going to happen on the New York Stock Exchange. Because these are regulated bodies, right? So I'm not necessarily advocating that cryptos themselves are regulated, but I think that the exchanges, for the consumer's protection, maybe some regulation on the exchanges may help to mitigate some of those risk factors.
No. No. And I'll tell you like this, man. The government already controls the on-ramp and off-ramp for crypto. Period.
Now,
you can't, unless you're spending crypto in a peer-to-peer fashion, the government already knows that you spent it. They have your address. They use chain analytics. They know who you are. They know everything. You KYC to get on an exchange. You KYC to get a bank account. So they know everything. I don't want them regulating exchanges. If an exchange is bad, let the market deal with it. If an exchange is bad, we just won't fucking put our money there. You see what I mean? Where
I do.
As the CME and the New York Stock Exchange, right? How do you get into that exchange? How do you get into the CME and the New York Stock Exchange? You have to open an account so that you can get stocks, whether it's self-directed or whether it's a custodial account, right? So now you're KYC and you're AML, and you're using, following AML laws and regulations to get in, right? And when the market says that a stock should drop or tank because the market says it should, because the people say it should, and they begin to sell off, the market stop trading on it. We're going to pause for 15 minutes. Because you don't know what's good for you. We know what's better for you. So we're going to pause trading on this particular stock.
You're talking about the circuit breakers.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to stop this from happening for a few minutes just to give you a chance to think clearly, and then we'll open it back up again. No,
well, as we know, that actually has nothing to do with the people. That's because they want the economic. They want to save the S&P. They want to make the S&P great again.
Yeah, that was so bullshit, because back in March when the S&P was crashing, and it kept crashing to a specific level where you had a lot of government money coming right back in to defend a certain level.
Well, right? They're on record as saying that they have a plunge protection team which buys back those dips to make sure that we don't completely obliterate.
Right. That's exactly my point, and it's a very interesting take here, because you're basically saying like the regulations is not good for the market.
No, it's not. I think the market can regulate itself.
I completely. A
proper market should be able to.
Well, yeah, a proper market is self-regulating.
Right. And that's when, oh God, don't get me started on buying back stocks and shit. That's a whole nother animal.
we'll be here for another 2 hours on that shit.
I think the layman does not understand that there is a differentiation between the economy and the stock market.
Well, I think that's by design, right? When you hear the talking heads on MSNBC and so forth, they always reference the S&P. Hey, stocks are going like this. It must be fine, to keep on keeping on, keep on going to work and being productive, right? And we're led to believe that it is, even though they're vastly different. Vast differences.
The stock market has been crashing since before 2008. I'm sorry, the economy has been crashing since before 2008.
I'd argue even since the 70s, right? That's when essentially there hasn't been inflation in wages enough to keep up with economic inflation. Additionally, we have the death of the production sector in the U. And this is the context is the U.S. here, right? And so, what is an economy, right? What is GDP? Well, it ties into production. So if we're not producing anything, or at least not at the rate to keep up with inflation, that's a real problem. Yep. And this is the gigantic bubble I see in the market. This is a general statement.
Just to jump in real quick, I mean, like, inflation has been pushed around to asset classes, which the Federal Reserve completely removes out of the inflation indicators. Like, for example, like housing and the stock market. They don't even look at housing and stock market and calculate that within the inflation indicator itself.
When I was in California, I was paying $2,400 a month. This was in 2014, by the way. $2,400 a month for like a shitty 2-bedroom apartment in San Jose, right? And I think, thank God I got out of there in a year. I couldn't take it anymore, and I moved back to Florida. But that same shitty, 2-bedroom apartment, they were going to raise my rent to $2,600, right? So you tell the Fed was bitching at that time. Oh, there's no inflation. There's no inflation. We'll tell the person who has to pony up an extra $200 a month for his apartment that there's no fucking inflation.
Dude, inflation is only reserved for the wealthy, man. For anybody who has money to invest in several homes or have like a nice 401k, man, you'll get inflation in rising those asset prices. But the ordinary person who's buying grocery and shit, man, they're not getting inflation.
Yeah, and is that person's weight? Are that person the wages increasing by a commensurate $200 to cover that rent? Absolutely
no. I tell people like this when I onboarding people to Bitcoin, and we begin to have that discussion about inflation. I'm old enough to remember when a tank of gas was 89 cents. I'm old enough to remember when you went to a fast food joint, you could get a value meal with a large fry and a large Coke for $2.99. I remember those things. We're talking the 80s. Look at today. That same value meal is going to cost you $8, depending on where you go, maybe 10. Five Guys, probably 12. Gas, when I lived in California in 2015, I was driving I had a Cadillac Escalade, the big SUV. Gas was $4 a gallon. And now gas is at $1.79, and people are like, oh yeah, this is great. And I'm looking at them like, still, you don't understand it. Yeah, gas is $1.79, but you're spending more money for everything else.
Mm-hmm. And we've been very long on record when the Fed basically said they used, for the first time that I've heard anyway, the fact that their intervention would be unlimited. Now, think about what that word means. That means they can print infinite money to make the situation better. Okay, that may do it in the short term, but then we're going to see things like hyperinflation. I mean, it didn't work well for Zimbabwe. It didn't work well for Rwanda. It didn't work well for Venezuela. What makes you think it's going to work well here?
It won't.
Exactly.
It's going to crash, and we're going to need a new system.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a very interesting segue here into the new system.
That's one question that I was reserving for the appropriate time with you, and that is the notion of central banks and whether they may adopt a digital currency. I know China, I believe Russia, if I remember correctly, were at least talking about it. Do you believe that
China's a very interesting take? I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Noir, but over in China, they don't even use physical cash for ordinary day commerce transactions.
No, they don't.
Right, everything is done through QR tags, and it's all done through like two large companies like Alipay and WeChat, if I'm correct. And it's essentially a digitalized financial system. Now, I'm not sure if they have cryptocurrency or blockchain technology backing that, but that's almost kind of like the evolution.
CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies, are coming, but they will not permeate the economy until they found a way to extrapolate all of the information about a person who uses it. Okay. WeChat, Alipay, they know everything about you when you use it because you buy from them. They know your spending habits. Hell, with deep analysis, they could probably tell you that you're pregnant before you know you're even pregnant.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's very similar to how Amazon's algorithm predicts your search results on the web and recommends products for you to use. It's the same
Yep.
thing. Just more ubiquitous over there, and to a certain extent, I mean, like the culture and society over there, they
Completely
accept,
Orwellian.
they accept that as the norm.
But I don't fault them for accepting that because that is their norm.
That's the reality.
That's their reality. We have privacy laws here that have been eroded since 2001.
Yeah, with the Patriot Act, that was one of the,
Right.
the largest infringements upon civil liberties. I would say basically in American history,
Right.
At least in terms of free speech.
And it's only going to get worse.
Freedom.
But it'll be presented to people as a way to make life easier
Or safer.
or safer. See, they got to scare the shit out of you to get things done, because if they don't scare the shit out of you, then you stop and ask questions like, why?
Well, you stop trusting them.
Right.
And they need you. They need that carrot on the fishing pole.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to my show sponsors today, and we were having a discussion about a book he's reading called Sapiens. And he expressed to me that nation states, governmental systems are all an illusion, and that their power is perceived, and that they wield power because we allow them to wield power.
Mhm.
And unlike a lot of countries, Americans are accustomed to having levels of freedom.
What we
Mind
think is
you,
freedom.
Right. Mind you, I did not say liberty because it's
Yeah.
a different thing.
Exactly.
Freedom is given to you. And
It's freedom, TM.
right. You know what I mean? And I don't think that it would fly the same way it does in China, but it's coming and
one
it
thing
will happen.
I do commend the Chinese for is they're just profligate about it and they're honest about it. We're not honest about it. We do much of the same things they do, but on the DL.
Yep. Totally agree. Full stop. Totally agree.
I guess even when people disappear there, they're pretty open about that too.
Yeah.
Oh man, so we're gonna get into like this digital world, right? I mean, like even now, I'll give you a very good example. Like even now with the whole coronavirus thing going on, right? Like I go to like the store to make payments for like groceries or whatever. Like I'm doing touchless, cashless payment systems, right? And I'm still baffled as to why these guys are so slow at transitioning into a much more advanced form of digitalized currency. I mean, like that's where we're going. I mean, obviously, paper money is gonna go the way of the dodo bird.
It's because they haven't figured out how to control yet.
Mhm.
They haven't figured. Their only example are decentralized cryptocurrencies. They haven't figured out how to control it yet. But once they figure out how to control it, they'll outlaw everything else and say you can only use this.
Do you think that? Well, actually, to that effect, Bitcoin. I remember reading that Bitcoin peer-to-peer Bitcoin transactions are illegal in Florida. So if I have a sofa on Craigslist and you want to buy it from me, you cannot use Bitcoin. It is illegal, right? And they flat out said in that document that I read that it threatens the monetary system. Not it's not good for you. They're worried about the consumer. No, it threatens the monetary system.
That's the truth.
And you had mentioned, yeah, absolutely.
That's the truth.
You had mentioned earlier about the perceived value of things. We always start our courses with this, right? Like, why is the US dollar worth anything at all, right? Because the fact is the value of it has gradually for a variety of reasons has been decreasing. The issue is when you compare it, because currencies always work in pairs, right? It makes no sense to talk about the value of the dollar in terms of euros or whatever. And when we're all dying together, we're all going in this downward spiral together. The ratio of that is going to flux, and you don't know the difference.
Right.
So another example we bring up, Chen, pull up that the one of that. What was his name? Giacovetti or whatever, the sculptor who made those $100 million sculptures, and they look like rusted metal that you'd find out of the ocean or something like that. And they're selling for $100 million, right? Some of these statues. And this is how I like to introduce the concept of value. It's just what anybody's willing to pay for whatever reason. A lot of that is marketing too. Andy Warhol, basically, like his artwork is this stupid pop art stuff that you can basically find anywhere. There's nothing, in my opinion, as someone who studied art, there's nothing really prolific about it. But he was brilliant at his marketing.
Yeah, this goes back to
that one. Yeah.
Yeah, this goes back to our whole point about like why we teach finance, economics, investing, and trading. Is that
looks like something I drape my clothes over?
Like you'd have to pay me to put this in my house. Like you'd imagine like walking into your house in the middle of the night and you see a statue like this would like
it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it'd scare the shit out of me, right? But it baffles my mind as to why somebody would pay $141 million for something like this, right? But then I mean, because I'm a finance guy, I'm an economics guy, I understand. There's a certain element to salesmanship to this that would entice somebody to pay that much for an artwork like this. I mean, it's all perceived value, right? I mean, it's just really what somebody is willing to pay for it. I mean, this thing could be worth like $14 if you can't find a buyer at $1 million. Or 100,000, right? The price will just keep going lower until the market decides what the price is. Well, in this case, this guy just happens to be a big swinging dick, hedge fund billionaire, and he's like, yeah, 140 million, that sounds about right. Boom, and he paid that much for it, and that's what the price is, right? Yeah. But really, if you give it to the market is the ultimate decider of what value anything will be, right? And
I'd have to disagree a little bit, though. I think the market did determine what the value of that piece was. He wasn't commanded or demanded to pay that much for that piece of art. He looked at it. He said, "I like it, and I'm willing to spend this much."
Correct, and that's essentially what he dictate as a market value, right? And now to determine that, to Danny's point, is that the artist can create value through sales and marketing, and to making somebody believe that this piece of art is worth that much, right? I mean, like, even if this thing is worth, its weight in gold, it's probably not going to be worth $141 million.
Agreed.
Right?
And I'd much rather have its weight in gold, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we're on the same boat in that one.
Right.
But so are you stacking physicals like gold and metals?
I am a silver bug.
Nice.
Oh,
I like silver too because it's used in a lot of electronics. So we are going to need silver, for the foreseeable future.
So what's your take on silver? Because, man, at the current prices, I feel like it's been lagging gold quite a bit.
I've never been able to figure that out. That intermarket correlation seems to lag gold, and the extent of the moves don't seem as much.
Well, I mean, it did
just
have,
in general.
It did have a good technical breakout where it broke the 15s.
Well, technical breakout for sure, but when you see,
I mean,
when you see it, if you can overlay it on top of gold, it just seems that the price movements in gold are a lot more drastic.
I think because it is an industrial metal that is precious, it's more heavily manipulated than gold.
Good
because
point.
If you look at the spot price of silver and then you go to a retailer or a buyer of silver, the premium is often 50% more than the spot price.
Very good point. Yeah, you see in the chart the we're basically forming like this bull wedge in gold, but on the corresponding chart in silver, it was unable to retrace to that relative high. What would that be? In March.
Well, I mean, just really quickly here, I think we have Powell speaking very soon, and you can see gold here essentially making new highs on the year. I mean, we're about to retest the 18s.
Exactly, and the same is not true of silver.
1920s, but silver again. I mean, like, this is the interesting about silver is that it's been such a huge lagger that I think eventually it'll catch up, which is why being a silver bug is really, really good. I personally have been on record trying to get my hands on some physical, but because of the whole coronavirus thing, it's been very, very difficult to access any bullions.
At one point, there was a 2 to 3 week delay on shipment because they were all out.
Yeah.
I am a big buyer of scrap silver.
Oh, okay.
So I like to buy 90% culled coins for silver.
Shit, how much silver you want, dog?
How much can you get?
I got it.
You do? Oh, okay.
Well, haul it on over, buddy.
Chase, you're coming to Florida soon, though, right?
Yeah. I don't know. My dad was. We were going to come down this weekend and look at a house, but the insurance premium for that property is almost $6,000 a year, and
It's on the water.
it's a $10,000 deductible. So
yeah,
my dad's just not hip to that right
Fair
now.
enough.
But yeah, we'll be down there soon for sure.
Cool. So another thing that I wanted to ask you, you said that you had mentioned earlier that you were a big fundamental advocate, which, I'm right there with you. I believe that a lot of the traders and investors even put much more faith in technicals than they really should. I mean, my job, what I focus on, my specialty, if you will, at Ghost Squawk is technicals, and I'm as the technicals teacher, I'm the first one to tell you the technicals are garbage. So now that's not to say that there's not things you could do, but you get the point, right? And I really like your take on the fact that you use technicals to look for entry opportunities, whereas your fundamentals guide where you're going to go, right? So it's kind of like the navigator of the ship, right? So given that we have the halving and also the fact that Bitcoin is, there's only a finite number of Bitcoins that will ever exist. Okay. And much of those have been mined, and, there's just going to be a point at which we have, Pokemon, we caught them all, right? So given that, what is your anticipated price point? What do you think is a fair market price for Bitcoin given those fundamentals? Or do you have one?
I don't.
Okay.
And I don't want to lie and say, I don't want to lie and give a number that sounds amazing to people. To me,
are you a
Bitcoin,
maximalist?
No,
Noir?
I'm a capitalist.
Nice.
Oh, there you go.
You know what I mean?
I love capitalism. Cheers to capitalism.
Cheers to capitalism.
I just bought a BMW on my credit card, man. Fuck it. Capitalism is the best.
Yeah, man. If it increases my overall wealth, then I'll buy and sell it. Period. I don't really care what it is. And with that said, I invest in coins that I know won't do anything. Because I am a capitalist and I believe I'm a principled investor. So there's some things that I buy that I know won't do anything, but I'll keep buying them because I believe in the projects.
Something that I've noticed, it seems to be like people that tend to invest in crypto have a more entrepreneurial mindset. Or
You kind of have to, though.
Yeah, I mean,
I would think.
Well, I mean, entrepreneurs take risk into account, right? I mean, like when you're getting into something like cryptos, especially if you're new, it's kind of risky, right? I mean, if you don't have that mindset, you just kind of like roll the dice, hope for the best.
Hell, I love to do that. I'll roll dice on Bitcoin websites all day.
Another valuation model that I had heard that I thought was really interesting is that it's not necessarily the specific value, but how they calculate it, right? So the value of social companies is often it's some proportion by the users squared, right? Because those users theoretically can interact with each other. And so this analyst was basically saying that a similar approach could be taken with Bitcoin, in that when more people adopt, it's not just about the scarcity and the set number of coins that could be possibly mined, as I mentioned before, but there's also that social component to it in terms of how many people are using it. Okay. Would you believe that would be a factor as well?
Definitely. Network effect.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yeah, definitely. I think the larger your user base, the higher the opportunity, the greater the opportunity for your user base to grow. Because people tell people about their experiences, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a product that people like and your user base is growing, I believe it will grow exponentially over time. And that's what I see coming for cryptocurrencies. Unpopular opinion, I believe that Bitcoin is a store of value now. But when I first got into it, it was money. And so a lot of people, started mining and trading Bitcoin to accumulate Bitcoin. But bro, I have very little Bitcoin now because I spend that shit.
Yeah.
If I need something, I spend it. I go out, I bought equipment for
It's your
my
checking
show.
Account.
Yeah. I bought equipment for my show. I bought a truck with Bitcoin.
Nice.
I paid for trips with Bitcoin. That's what it's for.
Now, as you see the cryptoverse evolving, right, do you think that there would be, you had mentioned some projects earlier that are more, fecundable to use as payment methods? Like a theory that, like, kind of my vision of just cryptos in general is that we're going to start to form see subclasses evolving. Like, because of some of the delays and things like that, I don't see Bitcoin necessarily being the payment vector in the future anyway. I see it as a store of value, like quote unquote digital gold, as some people are calling it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that may change when Lightning comes online and more people begin to use it.
Mm-hmm.
But Lightning channel operators may not be happy about that because then they pay the big fees.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I'd have to agree with that assessment. Bitcoin is a store of value. Even though it's fungible and easily divisible, if it grows the way I think it will grow, there will be a point where you will need something else for microtransactions because we're moving into the Internet of Things.
100%, yeah.
And that's why I say I think there'll be maybe 50 different currencies. I mean, think about it. Reddit just came out with their own crypto.
Right.
For, it's ERC20 for use on their platform to tip people. I think you'll start to see companies doing this more often.
We discussed about it at Ghost Squawk. We want a Ghost coin.
We wanted to do Ghost Squawk tokens.
Yeah.
Do it.
So would you recommend ERC20 as a easy way to do that? Because no? Okay.
That was a pretty quick answer.
No.
So what would you recommend?
One of my buddies.
Go ahead.
One of my buddies that he does a lot of crypto development. He suggested that he's actually going to probably do it for us, but I'd like to.
Because one thing that I understand about ERC20s is that, I mean, you could just download some Python code and have it ready in like a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's kind of like all the alts. Everything's pretty much based off of Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, there's really Snacks brought this up earlier on the last podcast. Is that there's really like only three. If you really want to be very general about it, there's really only three different types of coins, right? You have the Bitcoin, you have the smart contracts through Ethereum, and then you have privacy coins like Monero. That's pretty much what you got to work with.
See, I see it a little differently because Monero is built off of the Bitcoin code. I see SHA-256 coins, things that you mine. I see
proof of stake.
Proof of. Well, yeah, but I bundle those more into like the ERC20 kind of deal, right? And I see DAGs. Merkle tree directed acyclic graphic is different than the other two.
Now, for our newbie listeners, can you explain what exactly a directed acyclic graph is? Because I'm a math guy, so if I'm going to sit there and describe it, it's going to go.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that Litecoin is based off of a cyclic graphs, right?
No, it's SHA-256.
Yeah. And basically, the point of the Litecoin project was there's a point at which with Bitcoin, even at that time, it was still they basically wanted to democratize it more, such that for a lower price, you're getting essentially the same product. And
Right.
that I believe is a motivation of the Litecoin project. And that's been kind of my favorite currency for a long time until I got up this new ones.
Okay, I'll give you the easiest way to explain a DAG, or directed acyclic graphic coin. Think about, okay, let me start with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has blocks and hashes and nonces that go into creating transactions that get plugged into blocks, and they get mined every 10 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a block for a DAG, think about a Excel spreadsheet. When you put information into Excel, you're putting something into a cell, right? And you're reading the information that's in the cell. As I understand it, directed acyclic graphic is putting information into the cell and along the edges of the cell. So
Right.
you're able to hold more data per transaction. And in the case of Nano, each transaction is verified by the hardware that initiated that transaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that transaction gets propagated to the ledger. So it's, instead of having a 300 gigabyte blockchain that you have to download when you run a full node for Bitcoin, the packet that gets sent to the ledger for Nano is smaller than a UDP packet. So it's like a kilobyte.
That's all you need, yeah.
And it gets propagated throughout the network, and everyone knows it, everyone has it.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? So that's why DAGs are infinitely faster than Bitcoin. And that's also why DAGs are feeless, because the small proof of work that's done in a DAG is done on the machine that initiated the transaction.
Mm.
As opposed to having hundreds of thousands of machines verify.
Yeah, having to sit there and spin and waste energy.
Right.
I once heard that they burn like more oil than we burn in a year or something like that. There's all kinds of metrics done to, and a lot of this is the environmentalist kind of coming down on Bitcoin, because it is very computationally expensive. Mm-hmm. And it's, it draws a lot of juice basically. So some of these other approaches, just even from an information theory point of view, it's a kind of brilliant way to handle it, where all you need is sent in the packet that you have.
Right. And
that's the nature. What I think is powerful about graphs in general, this is, as an IT guy, you'll understand, we had RDBMS, which is basically your Excel spreadsheet type things, where we have like SQL and things like that. Then later on, we start to realize that a lot of these sparse networks or sparse database structures can be represented as graphs, right? Because we're dealing with relationships. That became even more important when we started introducing social media. Mm-hmm. So I think that the leveraging that in an information theoretical construct to send coins and to actually make transactions is just absolutely brilliant. That's what I remember reading that in the white paper. I was like, this is good.
Yeah. For me, I think DAGs are the future. Of course, some people don't like that approach. Some people think I'm crazy for saying that, but I believe feeless transactions are an easier way to onboard people than transactions that have variable transaction fees. Mm-hmm. Like today, correct. I sent, well, not today, day before yesterday, I'm getting some work done in my house. So I cashed out 600 in Bitcoin to pay the contractors that are coming in to do the work, because they don't accept Bitcoin, right? 2-3 months ago, that transaction would have cost me a couple bucks or less than $1. Mm-hmm. But when I made that transaction, it cost me $7.
Wow.
Do you remember 2018 at the height of the, when we were at all-time high? Mm-hmm. It's costing you $50-$60 to send a transaction for like $10.
Yeah.
When you onboard people to crypto, if you're onboarding them and they don't have sizable wealth to put into it, and you're asking them to use it as money, and they go to buy
A cup of coffee is costing $50. Yeah.
Right. And that cup of coffee, instead of being $2, is now $52. Their immediate response is, what the fuck was that?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you see what I mean? Like,
and for good reason too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Whereas if you're using something like Digibyte or Litecoin, it's pennies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's there, you know? So that's to go back to the question, am I a maximalist? No, I'm a capitalist, and that's why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think your statement about the best way to get adoption, kickstart adoption is through businesses. And I think we're basically saying the same thing here. But my point is we need to get people using this as money. I think we're basically saying the same thing here, because when you pay, you got to pay somebody, right? It's either going to be peer-to-peer, or it's going to be a business. So I think if we address both ends of that, we're going to see a lot of progress in adoption.
I agree. I think that time is coming. I don't think people quite understand just how debilitating hyperinflation is going to be in the U.S.
Yeah, we were actually talking about it. I believe it was in one of the live streams, Chen, or something, where we were basically breaking it down in terms of. And you had this point earlier, Noir, about the going for a value meal, right? So that value meal is now going to cost you like $15-20.
Right. A loaf of bread is now going to cost you $6.
Yeah.
A pound of ground beef, $12, $15. And if you're on a fixed income, or if you don't have a lot of disposable income, that's going to hurt.
Oh man,
and those people are going to be.
Well, and that's one thing that, like, Trump was on record about saying he advocates negative rates. And say what you want about the guy, I'm largely a fairly big fan of his. I think that of his policies and all that. But this is one thing I'm really, really against, right? Because my parents are pensioners, right, and they live off of fixed income. And so when the with pension funds, there's a large portion, government mandated, by the way, that has to be in bond holdings, right? So when we're in negative rates, those bond holdings are essentially paying out zero or like barely anything, right? And so the effect of that, you just can't. That's not sustainable for that part of the population.
You can't. Do you think we can get into negative rates in the 10-year? In the U.S. Noir?
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. The last 3 years has broken my faith.
We're in fantasy land here
right.
at this point.
So I honestly don't know.
We're in clown world.
Right. And I wouldn't even venture a guess.
Yeah, it's crazy to me because I have my own personal views on this. I think the United States, being the reserve currency of the world, they can't get away with monetary policies implemented in other parts of the world.
Yes,
For example, well, I mean, like when we're talking about going to negative rates, I mean, like in Japan, they've gone into negative. In the ECB,
for a long time, actually,
they're going
back again.
Deposits is at negative. But
again.
In the United States, when you get to negative, right, that's going to be a big issue, not just domestically, but all around the world as well, right? And that's why
it is the world reserve currency,
right? And that's why that's the point that I'm getting at is that if and when the 10 gets to 10, right? And that's going to be it's going to be a big event if it does, but it's to me, I feel like it's probably going to be the beginning of the end of the United States as a reserve currency if they allow the 10-year Treasury note, which is essentially the benchmark. I mean, all pensioners have holdings within the 10-year U.S. Treasury note. And if it goes in negative, meaning that they're not getting anything, it's going to create so much problems for that demographics, right? The demographics that needs savings the most.
I look at it this way. To go back to your point about us not being able to manipulate monetary policy around the world, the United States has a strategy of giving freedom. If you don't do what we say, we blow you the fuck up, and then we give you freedom.
Drop some freedom on these bitches.
That is a fact. Whether it's
Yep.
a popular opinion or not, that is
Look
a fact.
at Gaddafi in 2012, 2014.
And let's talk about that. The news will tell you that the reason we went over there is because of weapons of mass destruction and the way he was treating his citizens,
His
right?
people, yeah.
I
Right.
think that was completely
Well,
BS.
no, I know the story very intimately, right? It was basically because Gaddafi wanted to form what would essentially be the euro, but for African countries, right? And
Yep.
he wanted to, number one. Number two, he wanted to back it on gold.
On
Yep.
gold,
Something
yeah.
that in the United States ended in 1945,
Yep.
so that they could essentially run
Yeah.
the monetary system
And-
the way
and
they
it would
wanted
have
to.
been-
And they're like,
Yeah.
And additionally, a third point, he was going to be trading oil in it. So they're like, nope.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and the United States being the reserve currency was like
Drop some freedom on you.
he's got weapons of mass destruction. Let's go give him some freedom.
Yep. Yep.
And freedom that they have now, right? Let's talk about the freedom that they have in Libya. It's basically overrun by warlords. There might be a puppet government on paper, but it's basically run now by warlords.
Well, they left a big vacuum zone
There's a
with
vacuum
the
of power.
fall.
Nature
Yeah.
abhors a vacuum.
They always do that. And then they'll install someone who is aligned with U.S. interests.
Correct.
And then
A stooge.
Yeah.
then they'll flood money into their economy, change their reserve to the U.S. dollar again.
Yeah.
And then people will be subservient to the U.S. government.
Right.
But to go back to your point about reserve currency, that's changing. Have you guys ever heard of the BRICS nations?
Yeah, of course.
Right? They are developing their own method of commerce and trade backed by gold. And because they are collectively a very large economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they will be larger than the U.S. economy.
Combined, yeah.
Combined,
Of course.
collectively, right?
Well, I mean, China alone already rivals the U.S. I mean, like if you
Right.
throw in, Brazil, Russia, India, I mean, you just throw in India on that, it's game over, right? You know,
Right.
and then Brazil, Russia, and India, they're all over in Asia.
Right. And you add that in,
Not
there's
Brazil.
already a challenge to the U.S. reserve currency. And there's no way out of that because we're not going to drop freedom on people who can fight back.
Exactly.
We only give freedom to people who can't resist.
Who can't fight? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
See what I mean?
Just to retract what I said earlier, it was China, India, and Russia that's over in Asia, and I completely agree with your point there. And it aligns with a lot of my macro views on where I see things are going. In the sense that I think China is really stepping up as a new world superpower, and they're doing everything that they
China
can.
and Russia together.
Well,
particular
let's say
China,
China
yeah.
and friends.
Yeah.
You can whoever allies with them, right? But like through initiatives like the One Belt One Road initiative,
Yep.
things like that. Having oil being priced in the yuan, like there's yuan oil futures now. And they're essentially securing their financial system for the inevitable switch when they overtake the United States and then they have the majority of the world transacting in a currency of their choice, right? And then to me, I really feel like it's like a big struggle between the United States holding on to what they can or have had and fighting a new superpower that's inevitably going to take over. I mean, like the United... Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really feel like the United States is just, they're on their way out, right? And they're trying to do everything that they can to hold on to what's left.
And what I can add to that is that the biggest buyers of gold is China and Russia. They're central banks.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and traditionally speaking, like if you go back to like
And India too.
if you go back to like 1930s, 1940s, when the U.S. transitioned to be the dominant superpower, they were backed by gold, right? It's gold that allowed them to essentially transact all world commerce in U.S. dollars and have everybody fix their currency to U.S. dollars because they were backed by physical commodity. It's the same strategy China's applying now. You have all the gold, you make all the rules. The golden rule, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, like the way I see it is like it's an inevitable transition, but obviously the United States, they got a lot of pride, and I don't blame them. They're gonna go down. They're gonna go down fighting. Right?
I'll tell you like this, man. China is going to become the superpower because China does not view others as less than. They view them as prey economically.
And tools.
But they don't view them as less than. The United States has viewed the continent of Africa as less than since it was a country. And now China is spending massive amounts of money.
Yeah, to build the infrastructure in Africa, to basically invest. Yeah, absolutely, to invest in Africa. Yeah,
and now you got 1.2 billion people who are dependent upon Chinese investments on the African continent.
Yeah.
And China is going to be a powerhouse in getting goods and services off of the continent of Africa abroad.
Oh, yeah, of course. You got a lot of great Black and Asian relations over there.
It's coming. It's coming, man. I'm telling you.
Did you see the video with, I believe it was the president of Ghana, and basically he was on the podium with Macron, and he basically told him straight up, like, we don't want to depend on you anymore. We have brilliant young Africans who are going out to study, who are coming back to Africa rather than going to US, rather than going to Europe. And we're building our own shit. Fuck off, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But basically, that was the point of it. You know what I mean? And Macron was just like,
yeah. I mean,
you know what's funny about that? People don't realize that most of the gold in Europe came through the colonization of Africa, right?
Oh,
and that Haiti pays $500 million a year to France for beating their ass in 1804 and kicking them off Hispaniola. And now there is a new player on the block who may not necessarily have the utmost respect for those nations and their people, but will treat them with a level of fairness that they've never seen before. And it's the stick and carrot kind of thing. They're dangling the carrot, not hitting you with the stick.
Right.
And slowly but surely, we're going to start seeing countries along the southern hemisphere moving towards Chinese goods,
aligning with
service, and money.
Aligning more with them.
It's already too late for us to do anything about it. I mean, I think the only thing that we could do at this point, literally, and people are not going to like this, but we would need a digital currency. We would need a digital currency to do that. I honestly believe that a digital currency is the way out for America and our hyperinflation that's soon to be.
Can you take some time to kind of expand on that, like how that would happen, you know, what the steps would be?
Okay. Well, right now, America does quantitative easing by pumping and injecting money into the financial ecosystem.
Magic!
Right. And it's backed by nothing, right?
Exactly. It's backed by the faith in that system.
It's not even backed by that. It's backed by bullets and bombs.
There you go.
There you go. Keep it real.
Drop some freedom on these bitches.
Right. You know what I mean? But Bitcoin does quantitative hardening.
It's the other way around, yeah.
So the stock to flow changes in the favor of the person who is holding Bitcoin every time we have a halving. If you want to, once the system breaks, we wouldn't need to move back to a system that's based on gold or based on silver or based on something that is tangible and scarce.
Almost like there's a reason we've been doing this since the dawn of human history.
And the reason that people moved away from gold is because as it became more valuable, it became less divisible.
Well, and the excuse that they give us is that, well, okay, in hard times, people want to withdraw because there was a time at which you could exchange $1 US for its comparative amount in gold, right? So when times got hard, people were like, fuck the US dollar, I want my gold. And that's the excuse they give us. But in reality, it was for control.
Yeah, well, and that hindered the debt-based system anyways. I mean, like, if you print more money when it's backed by gold, that money that's being printed is just going to be exchanged for gold, which would hurt the gold reserve, right? So
So it's a very simple solution. Just don't have it be backed by gold, but you can't withdraw it in terms of gold.
Well, I mean, didn't Nixon in '71 said we're temporarily suspending the conversion of dollars to gold? I mean, like that quote of
if I recall, that was 1945, but I could be wrong.
Temporary suspension, has lasted for like
the
40 years, right?
40-year temporary suspension.
So hey, guess what, man? One day they could remove that temporary suspension.
But I think that's
actually why I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Noir, but one more point to throw in there. But there's a lot of conspiracy theories on why Kennedy was assassinated. But if you look at one of the bills he was pushing, Order 11110, was actually to do just that, to start to shift the basis back to hard assets and scarce resources.
Mm-hmm. That's sound money.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about what the value of it's going to be tomorrow or a year or 10 years or even 100 years.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
And an additional
by scarcity.
Well, and an additional benefit that I've heard is that the rate at which it mines is roughly tracking inflation.
Right. What, 2-3%, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, inflation where? Inflation in the U.S. or are we talking about like inflation in Africa here?
Okay, fine. Like it's not going to be Zimbabwe inflation, okay? $1 billion% or whatever it was. Well, Noir, I just wanted to, remind you we're coming upon that 2-hour mark. I know you said that was the amount of time you were comfortable with, and had a great conversation. It's easy to get caught up, but I respect your time. We respect our guests, so I just want to throw that out there. If you have any closing things you'd like to say or way to wrap this up.
Wale, if you have any questions that you want to ask, now's probably a good time to ask Noir.
I do actually. What's your research strategy for Bitcoin? Because you mentioned earlier during your discussion, you like to research before you buy. I have one Bitcoin I'm looking at. It's called Tezos, TEOS, and the symbol is XTZ.
Yep.
So I just want to know what research steps I should take to research that before looking at purchasing.
First thing I would do is read their white paper.
Okay, white paper.
What are they now? I'm saying this because I hold Tezos. Okay.
You hold Tezos already? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I hold Tezos. Read the white paper to see what they're about. Right.
Okay.
One of the things that I like about Tezos is that when you're baking it, you get interest. So if you're baking it in a wallet or staking it, depending on who's doing the baking for you, you can get 5 to 7% interest on your Tezos. Wow. Right?
Nice.
But one of the things that really fucks with me about Tezos is you can't go anywhere to find the max supply.
Okay.
And then it goes back to that same discussion we were having about the US dollar. There's no max supply. And as more enters the ecosystem, the value of it goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Do I hold it? Yep, I sure do. Am I baking it, trying to collect interest? I sure am. I have a nice piece of change in Tezos. And once it hits my target, I'm going to cash it all out for Bitcoin because that's just the ultimate goal for me.
Have to keep it real.
Right.
When you plan to cash out, because I saw it online, it says it might hit 75 in 2024 or 2025.
You know what, man? Don't ever take those projections as law.
And Wale, it's the same thing in stocks too. Like we're very critical of the analysts. We said earlier on this podcast where if Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are telling you to buy something, get the fuck out of that thing. Especially Kramer says it. Kramer is the best inverse indicator in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But just keep in mind the same thing for cryptos, right? If we have these analysts, right? Who are analysts? They're just dudes like us, right? And they just happen to have a blog or on something that gives them a platform.
Well, it's even worse, man. A lot of bank analysts don't even have any skin in the game.
No, I remember we had a conversation. We had a conversation with one, if you remember this, Chen, and she didn't even know how central bank interest rates affect like the currencies, and that was her job, the bank.
Well, I mean, my point here is that you can have many. I mean, the analyst is just just a person with an opinion, right? But worse is that there no respect for any analyst, especially bank analysts, is that they're not even allowed to have any skin in the game, right? So why? How can you take an opinion from somebody who is just throwing you, giving you magical numbers, when they don't even have any stake in it? So just be cautious with that. I mean, like,
well, and again, like to draw the parallel between us, it's like we're not financial advisors. We will never tell you, hey, buy this, do this with your money. We can say, I did this and for this reasons, right?
Yeah. On that, we'll just close it out from here. So, Noir, I would like to say thank you very much, brother, for coming on and doing the show with us. I learned quite a bit about cigars today.
Yeah, I definitely have a place to start for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And just a quick plug, Danny and I are gonna be on Cigars and Cryptos on the 25th at 6 p.m. So you guys can catch us on Noir's podcast talking about more crypto stuff, more Ghost Squawk AI projects that we're doing related to cryptocurrencies and whatnot.
Yeah, so guys, please make sure you check out his experience, the Cigars and Crypto podcast. You said you're available on what was that platform?
I'm on iTunes.
Anchor?
I'm on Anchor, iTunes,
yeah.
Spotify, iHeartRadio. I'm everywhere.
Make sure you check them out, guys.
And very quickly, Noir, if anybody's watching and they wanna have a cigar with you, how can they reach out to you?
You can catch me on Twitter at InvestNoir, InvestNoir. I am on Instagram at Cigars and Crypto. And just reach out, man. Visit me online at cigarsandcrypto.com. You can put your contact information at the bottom on the contact page, and I'm very responsive. I'll get back to you.
All right. With that being said, we'll pop a bottle. Cheers,
Appreciate
brother.
your time, man. Cheers
Appreciate
to you, Noir. Thanks
Cheers
again for coming on.
Thank you.
A lot of
very
great
much for coming
content.
on.
Really value your time. So really appreciate
you,
that,
Noir.
man. Much love, brother.
No problem, man. Hey, man, you guys be safe, all right? And take care.
Take care.